comparing Idi Amin's and Yoweri Museveni's rule in Uganda. Introduction. Uganda's political history has been profoundly shaped by the leadership of Idi Amin, 1971 to 1979, and Yoweri Museveni, 1986 present. Both leaders have left indelible marks on the nation's political, social, and economic landscapes, yet their approaches, ideologies, and legacies differ starkly. This analysis compares and contrasts their regimes using key dimensions: governance and political structure, human rights and social impact, economic policies and outcomes, and international relations. By examining these aspects, we gain insight into how their leadership styles influenced Uganda's trajectory, governance, and political structure. Idi Amin's regime. Idi Amin seized power in a military coup in January 1971, overthrowing President Milton Obote. His rule was characterized by authoritarianism and militarization. Amin dissolved parliament, suspended the constitution, and ruled by decree, consolidating power within a small circle of loyalists, primarily from the military. His regime lacked institutional checks and balances, with decision-making centralized in his hands. Political parties were banned, and opposition was ruthlessly suppressed. Amin's reliance on the military, particularly loyal factions from his home region of West Nile, fostered a climate of fear and instability. Governance was erratic, with policies often driven by impulse rather than strategy, leading to administrative chaos. Yoweri Museveni's regime. Yoweri Museveni came to power in 1986 after a 5-year guerrilla war led by his National Resistance Army (NRA). Initially, Museveni introduced a no-party system, arguing that political parties fueled sectarianism. His National Resistance Movement (NRM) dominated governance, blending democratic rhetoric with authoritarian control. Over time, Museveni restored multi-party politics in 2005 under international pressure, but the NRM has maintained dominance through electoral manipulation, patronage, and control of state institutions. Unlike Amin's overt military rule, Museveni's governance combines democratic institutions with subtle coercion, including media censorship and harassment of opposition figures. His long tenure has raised concerns about democratic backsliding, with constitutional amendments removing presidential term and age limits. Comparison. Both leaders centralized power, but their methods differed. Amin's governance was overtly dictatorial, relying on military force and personal loyalty, with little pretense of democratic norms. Museveni, conversely, has operated within a quasi-democratic framework, using elections and institutions to legitimize his rule while undermining opposition. Amin's regime was short-lived and chaotic, while Museveni's prolonged rule has allowed for more structured, albeit flawed, governance systems. Both suppressed political pluralism, but Museveni's approach is more sophisticated, leveraging legal and institutional mechanisms to maintain control. Human rights and social impact. Idi Amin's rule was notorious for its human rights abuses. His regime targeted perceived enemies, including political opponents, intellectuals, and ethnic groups such as the Akali and Lanji, who were associated with Obote's regime. Estimates suggest 100,000 to 500,000 Ugandans were killed or disappeared during his 8-year rule. The expulsion of approximately 70,000 Asians in 1972, whom Amin accused of economic sabotage, devastated Uganda's middle class and social fabric. Religious leaders, journalists, and professionals faced persecution, and public executions became common. Amin's policies deepened ethnic divisions, as he favored groups like the Kakwa and Lugbara, alienating others. Social services, including education and healthcare, deteriorated due to mismanagement and resource diversion to the military. Yoweri Museveni's regime has a mixed human rights record. Early in his rule, he was praised for stabilizing Uganda after years of civil war and restoring basic services. His government implemented policies to promote gender equality, such as affirmative action for women in education and politics, and tackled HIV/AIDS through aggressive public health campaigns. However, human rights abuses have persisted, particularly against political opponents. Security forces have been accused of extrajudicial killings, torture, and arbitrary arrests, especially during election periods. The suppression of protests, media censorship, and laws restricting freedom of expression, such as the Public Order Management Act, have drawn criticism. Ethnic tensions, while less pronounced than under Amin, remain, with accusations of favoritism toward Western Ugandans. Social services have improved under Museveni, but corruption and unequal access continue to undermine progress. Comparison means human rights abuses were overt, widespread, and indiscriminate, creating a climate of terror. Museveni's violations, while significant, are more targeted, often aimed at political rivals or dissenting voices, and are less visible due to a veneer of legal processes. Amin's expulsion of Asians had a catastrophic social impact, while Museveni's policies, such as poverty reduction programs, have fostered some social progress. Though unevenly distributed, both regimes have been criticized for ethnic favoritism, but Amin's policies were more divisive and violent. Museveni's longer tenure has allowed for some social gains, but persistent abuses and inequality temper these achievements. Economic policies and outcome. Idi Amin's regime. Amin's economic policies were disastrous. The expulsion of Asians, who controlled much of Uganda's commerce and industry, led to economic collapse. Businesses were handed to inexperienced loyalists, resulting in mismanagement and shortages. Amin's nationalization of foreign companies deterred investment, and his reliance on printing money fueled hyperinflation. Agricultural exports, particularly coffee, suffered due to neglect and corruption. By 1979, Uganda's economy was in ruins, with GDP declining significantly and infrastructure crumbling. Amin's erratic policies, such as trade bans with neighboring countries, further isolated Uganda economically. Museveni's regime. Museveni inherited a shattered economy but implemented reforms that spurred recovery. With support from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, his government embraced market-oriented policies, including privatization and trade liberalization. These reforms attracted foreign investment and boosted GDP growth, averaging 5 to 7% annually in the 1990s and 2000s. Infrastructure development, such as roads and electricity, improved significantly. However, economic gains have been uneven, with rural poverty persisting and youth unemployment rising. Corruption scandals, including the misappropriation of public funds, have undermined economic progress. Museveni's government has also faced criticism for over-reliance on donor funding, which has strings attached, limiting policy autonomy. Comparison. Amin's single quotes economic mismanagement was catastrophic, driven by impulsive decisions and lack of expertise. Museveni's policies, by contrast, reflect a more pragmatic approach, leveraging international support to rebuild the economy. While Amin's regime caused immediate economic collapse, Museveni's has achieved sustained growth, though marred by inequality and corruption. Both leaders faced challenges in diversifying the economy, with Uganda remaining dependent on agriculture. Museveni's longer rule has allowed for more consistent economic planning, but systemic issues like corruption echo the inefficiencies of Amin's era, albeit on a less destructive scale. International relations. Idi Amin's regime. Amin's foreign policy was erratic and isolationist. Initially supported by Western powers, including Britain and Israel, he alienated them by nationalizing foreign businesses and aligning with Libya and the Soviet Union. His expulsion of Asians strained ties with Britain and India. Amin's aggressive rhetoric, including claims to parts of Kenya and Tanzania, and his support for Palestinian militants, further isolated Uganda. The 1976 Entebbe hostage crisis, where Israeli commandos rescued hostages from a hijacked plane, highlighted his pariah status. The 1978-1979 war with Tanzania, triggered by Amin's invasion of the Kagera region, led to his downfall as Tanzanian forces and Ugandan exiles ousted him. Yoweri Museveni's regime. Museveni has pursued a more strategic foreign policy, positioning Uganda as a regional power. His government has cultivated strong ties with Western donors, particularly the United States and United Kingdom, securing aid and military support. Uganda's participation in peacekeeping missions, such as in Somalia under the African Union, has bolstered its international standing. However, Museveni's involvement in regional conflicts, including support for rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan, has drawn criticism. His government has balanced relations with both Western and Eastern powers, including China, which has invested heavily in Ugandan infrastructure. Museveni's longevity has made him a regional elder statesman, though his authoritarianism has strained relations with some democratic partners. Comparison means foreign policy was chaotic, driven by personal grudges and ideological shifts, leading to Uganda's isolation. Museveni, by contrast, has pursued pragmatic diplomacy, leveraging Uganda's strategic position to secure aid and influence, while Amin's actions, such as the Asian expulsion and Entebbe crisis, made Uganda a global outcast. Museveni's engagement in regional security and economic partnerships has enhanced Uganda's standing. Despite occasional controversies, both leaders have been criticized for regional meddling, but Museveni's approach is more calculated and less confrontational. Legacy and long-term impact. Idi Amin's legacy. Amin's 8-year rule left Uganda economically devastated, socially fractured, and internationally isolated. His legacy is one of fear, violence, and economic ruin. The trauma of his regime lingers in Uganda's collective memory, with the expulsion of Asians and mass killings serving as stark reminders of his brutality. However, some communities, particularly in West Nile, view him nostalgically for his favoritism toward their region. Amin's rule exposed the dangers of unchecked authoritarianism and set a low bar for subsequent leaders. Yoweri Museveni's legacy. Museveni's legacy is complex and evolving. He is credited with stabilizing Uganda, fostering economic growth, and advancing social policies like HIV/AIDS awareness. However, his prolonged rule, marked by electoral controversies and human rights concerns, has fueled accusations of dictatorship. Museveni's vision of a modernized Uganda is tempered by persistent poverty, corruption, and youth discontent. His regional influence and ability to navigate global partnerships contrast with domestic criticism over democratic erosion. As of 2025, Museveni's legacy remains contentious, with his contributions weighed against his authoritarian tendencies. Comparison means legacy is overwhelmingly negative, defined by destruction and division. Museveni's is more nuanced, with significant achievements overshadowed by governance challenges. Both leaders have shaped Uganda's identity, but Amin's impact was immediate and catastrophic. While Museveni's longer tenure offers a mix of progress and stagnation, their legacies highlight the challenges of balancing strong leadership with democratic ideals in a post-colonial context. Conclusion: the regimes of Idi Amin and Yoweri Museveni represent two distinct eras in Uganda's history. Amin's rule was a period of chaos, marked by authoritarianism, human rights abuses, and economic collapse. Museveni's tenure, while achieving stability and growth, grapples with democratic deficits and inequality. Both leaders centralized power and faced criticism for ethnic favoritism. But Museveni's strategic governance and international engagement contrast with Amin's erratic isolationism. Understanding their impact requires acknowledging their contributions and failures as Uganda continues to navigate the legacies of these transformed